The beginning of the summer annual blockbuster tradition started with one night in Charlotte. And man, oh man, I miss wrestling crowds like this. I miss the days when they would get enthralled and energetic over the most basic of moves, the most basic of matches on the surface, but they were so invested in the roster. It was so nice to see. Even if there are some things you can look back on and say, some of the old days were great. But then there were things where you're like, wow, I forgot this guy worked here. And ooh, I wish this guy hadn't worked here. But let's talk about all of this stuff that took place on July 6, 1985. I'm John Renton with the Retro View of NWA WCW Great American Bash 1985 from the American Legion Memorial Stadium in Charlotte, North Carolina. So, this was uploaded in full, or at least in the most complete form possible, due to original technical difficulties, according to the Chiron for the WCW channel. I guess you could call it the WCW Vault channel, but the thing is, WWE finally realized, hey, wait a second, we need to gain some goodwill. Let's get the old fans back by having a WCW channel. And this originally was like a VHS copy where they had some stuff edited and clipped and stuff like that, but now we get a 2-hour and 20-minute edition where I'm sure there were still things that were cut out. I mean, they cut out the David Allan Coe concert, which Google David Allan Coe. He's not still alive. There's no way he can still be alive. He has to be dead by now. But he had long hair, and he had music in the sense that he was some kind of music. I don't know. I need to listen to some David Allan Coe, but from what I recall hearing him, like when dinosaurs roamed the earth, which is when I was young, I don't remember him being all that great, but then again, I don't care for country, folksy, whatever music. So, let's go with a little bit of history as far as how we got to this particular event. So obviously you go back to Starrcade 1983, Flair for the gold, Flair beats Harley, Gene Kiniski nearly ruining the whole goddamn thing by trying to treat it like a legit match. Good job, Gene Kiniski, may you rest in peace, former NWA champion, but you stupid asshole. You were as good of a referee as your son Kelly was as a wrestler in the territories. That's mean, because I'm sure Kelly actually probably tried his hardest, but nevertheless. So, also it had the Doge collar match, Much Piper, Such Wow, and Greg Valentine, as well as Steamboat and Youngblood against the Briscoes, and it was a layered card, even though it was a snowstorm, and they were worried about, some stuff going on there, and stopping the people. Nope, they even had a closed circuit location. I believe they did well as far as the box office. And Dusty had just come in from Florida and was actually going to start bringing his people in that was going to lead to a shift in business in 84. And the thing is, the Starrcade 83 was a big goddamn deal. It beat WrestleMania by more than a year. And then Vince gets full control of the company from his dad and is doing his national expansion in 83 and doing a lot of his stuff and taking his company national, which actually would lead us to an event that took place a number of months before Starrcade 84. You had the Brawl to End It All, you had the War to Sell the Score that were coming up, and you had the MTV crossover with Cyndi Lauper. But you also had a little thing called Black Saturday, which is covered in Black Saturday, The Rise of Vince, on the Dark Side of the Ring episode. That was, I believe, the end of season 5. And it was a pretty good episode. There were, to be quite honest, I think they should have done 2 parts. Like, there were just so many things that they glossed over. If you knew the story, then you understood enough of it, but you were also frustrated by stuff that they left out. But the thing is in July, it was July 14th or 16th, 1984. Somewhere around there. But he got the TBS time slot because Jim Barnett was one of the shareholders with Ole Anderson and the Briscoes for Georgia Championship Wrestling, but things were starting to fall into a goddamn hole with various decisions, various things going on. Barnett may have been taking money from the office, may have not, who knows, but he also put money back in the office. Ole, the rosy-cheeked individual and happy-go-lucky motherfucker that he was, great wrestler, not a very happy guy, apparently. He ended up kind of ousting Jim Barnett, who went right into the arms of Vince McMahon. Not like that. But Jim Barnett helped broker a deal to get the Briscoes jobs in. Well, he helped broker a deal basically for Vince to get the time slot. The Briscoes were guaranteed jobs in the WWF. Jerry Briscoe in particular, Jack Briscoe, I don't think lasted very long. Jack Briscoe may have still been paid, but he went home sometime in 84. No, 85. He went home sometime in 85. He's like, I'm done. I don't want to deal with this weather anymore. But the thing is Jim Barnett had helped broker this, so in the summer of 84, Vince McMahon gets on WTBS while he has All-Star Wrestling and his other syndicated shows on USA, NWOR, which was another, I think WOR was a USA Network affiliate, or was it the other way around? I'm trying to remember. But he had all this stuff going. He had gotten Hogan from the AWA, many other people from the AWA. He was doing his expansion, and Crockett was doing well on syndicated television. The thing is that the narrative is that, they were on TBS and then they got kicked off. I mean, the idea was that Vince got the deal, and Crockett didn't get a chance to get on there yet. Ole Anderson got an early morning show for, I believe, Georgia. And this had been talked about in the Jim Cornette Experience and Drive-Thru. Yes, I listen to those shows weekly and often because they're entertaining, whether I agree with Mr. Cornette and Mr. Last on every single thing. We're all a difference of opinion, but as far as wrestling history, I love that podcast because it's great shit. So, nevertheless, and hearing it from somebody that actually was, in wrestling at the time, living it, working hard, even though Cornette at that point, him and Condrey and Eaton were in Mid-South Wrestling. Hearing about all this stuff and, the fact that Vince McMahon, he didn't have any matches in the WTBS studios. It was just arena matches, package shows. People were pissed. Where's our quote-unquote Gordon Soley Wrestling? Where's all this stuff? Get this bullshit off our television. Eventually, it leads to where Vince is either going to be canceled or he's going to have to broker a deal because Turner was pissed. He was pissed mainly because he's like, okay, Vince was going to come over to us, but he wanted to stay on USA Network and he wasn't honoring this part of the deal. To be fair, Vince has always been kind of a shady individual and like to shit all over people, which probably was a poor choice of words, but I meant in business. Boy, that really could have been done better, but let's just move on from that. Move on. Billionaire Ted. So anyway, he essentially had to broker that deal, and what ended up happening was Jim Crockett paid him $1 million for the time slot. Vince's like, you'll choke on that $1 million. I'm gonna make you choke on it. How's he gonna choke on the $1 million? Did he give whatever? It's fine. Doesn't actually grammatically make sense. But that, in addition to the $1 million booking fee from Inoki, around that time, helped finance and push them to WrestleMania. Even though they were making tons of money, but they were running 3 to 4 shows a night with that many crews, because that's how many people Vince McMahon absorbed. He's paying for TV. Yes, they were making lots of money, but good God. But back to Crockett. Crockett then, got that just around April of 85, because I think it was like the last TBS show for WWF was the night before WrestleMania, I think. And then Crockett took over. So realistically, it was only 3 months that they had that. And then they would end up, expanding and buying the Florida territory after Eddie Graham took his own life, in January of this year, this event that we're eventually going to talk about, finally, thank fucking God, as well as just the great, the rotting away of the territories and everything. There was a Pro Wrestling USA thing that kind of went tits up, especially after Super Clash, because Vern Gagne didn't know how to run business, or didn't want to run a business properly, because, let's be honest, by Wrestle Rock 86, look after that, look at the AWA business. And Crockett, granted, was having some issues because he bought Central States. He didn't have to buy Kansas City. Buying the UWF and doing nothing with the talent, all that stuff, that was years afterwards. This is what would lead to the Great American Bash Tour of 86, where they would run in various stadiums and arenas in their markets. 87, they toned down a little bit in 87. And 88, they were still running some stadiums, but they were trying to be a little more fiscally responsible after being $5 million in the hole, $3 to $5 million, whatever the fuck it was. So now we basically are going to get to the event that, is like presented in 2 hours and 20 minutes. And I do want to say the parachuters doing their thing. That was kind of funny. No commentary on the show, which was kind of nice. Because I think Schiavone was probably doing the commentary. I don't know who else would have. Because it couldn't have been David Crockett, King of the Wild Frontier. The ring announcer sucks. If he's still alive, I'm sorry if you happen to be watching this random individual. I think that's CJ, because there's somebody that refers to somebody as CJ later. If he's still alive, my God, somebody should have told him to find something else to do after this, because he was terrible. He would mispronounce all these. He wouldn't mispronounce the wrestlers' names, but he would like fuck up the finishes and stuff like that. And American Legion Stadium, by the way, I think it can be customized. It says 10,500 seats, but that's including the field. And the field can have, I assume, customizable stuff. So realistically, they had that place jam-packed. It says 27,000 according to Wiki, and that's a big deal. So Nature Boy Buddy Landel, yes, a discount. Ric Flair, who was a really good worker, self-destructive. Cornette talked about that. Was only 24, 25 here. He had J.J. Dillon as his manager, and Buddy took on Outlaw Ron Bass, Cowboy Ron Bass, actually, at this point. Ron Bass was a babyface because he had been aligned with J.J. Dillon. J.J. had turned on him. That would actually carry over to Starrcade 85 with J.J. beating Ron Bass after some fucked up stuff after Ron Bass had beaten Black Bart. Referee Sonny Fargo for the first three. Earl Hebner, I believe, for a couple matches, and then David Crockett for one, and Tommy Young for a couple others. Sonny Fargo, Memphis legend as he was, and I mean he'd done other territories, but Memphis was a place where he was really popular. But he would be gone by late '85 because he kept fucking things up. That was talked about in When Giants Walked Here, that PBS special. That actually was a whole lot of fun with a lot of really cool B-roll and footage. So, we basically had a lot of slowdown here in the beginning. Buddy was stalling a lot. And then we would get JJ attacking Ron after Buddy hurled himself stupidly into the ring or into the buckle with his shoulder. Good tactic there. And then Outlaw or Cowboy locked on the Iron Claw, much like Fritz, not like David, who had croaked, and much like Mike couldn't have done that because Mike wasn't able to grip anything or shoulder the responsibility. I'll stop with Von Erich jokes one of these days, but at least I can gut mine out. And since this was on July 6, 1985, I think Mike had just had a shoulder problem. I think so, if I recall correctly. Mike should have never been in the wrestling ring. He's not on the show, thankfully, but I just had to say that. But Ron worked on the shoulder, and then a long sleeper hold by Buddy. They weren't always great moments. I know the whole point of this was you didn't have to do every goddamn move in the universe, and you could get people into it with wrestles and, you know, certain spots and stuff like that. But, man, there were some points where I'm like, boy, you could skip about 5 minutes of some of these matches and not miss shit. JJ got his shots in. I did like how Buddy got his foot on the rope after a big move, and Ron was like, hey, what? And I don't know why that made me laugh. A time limit draw, brief brawl, but Ron manages to get JJ just close enough to get the claw hold on, just enough of a tease that would push us to the aforementioned Starrcade 85. So we get Arn and Ole Anderson defending the NWA National Tag Team Championships against Dick Slater and Buzz Sawyer, who stole Bruiser Brody's boots. If this was after July 16th of 88, he would have had to have stolen them off his corpse. Call an ambulance. What the hell is wrong with me? Carlos Colon and Jose Gonzalez deserve to be locked up in jail for that. Face Sawyer and Slater. And Sawyer, nobody had anything nice to say about him. Not Magnum TA, not Jim Cornette. Nobody did. And look at Buzz Sawyer. He looked halfway an idiot and an inbred prick. So he's dead. I don't care. And Arn bumped his ass off here. Ole didn't do much, but what he did well because he'd been wrestling for 20 years. They worked on the arm. Arn hurt himself and stopped himself from swearing. Called himself Darn Anderson. And now that everybody shut the review off because of that terrible joke, at one point Buzz had Arn down. Ole hit an elbow and covered Buzz, covering his head, even though you should be able to tell the difference. 1, 2, 3, And there we are. Winners on a disqualification. Good job. Good job, ring announcer fuck nugget. Good job. Manny Fernandez, Buzz Tyler, Avalanche Buzz Tyler. Why was he called Avalanche Buzz Tyler? Was it an avalanche of apathy? I mean, I nothing against Buzz Tyler, but like, why was he called Avalanche Buzz Tyler? So, Sam Houston, who was as big around as a garden hose, but a garden hose was more useful. They could put a garden hose in a goddamn ring and it would have done better. Sam Houston went through a lot of shit. Look at his family lineage. Just look at that. But look who his brother is. You may be surprised at that. I'm leaving a few factoids out so you all can check this out. But Sam Houston was not a bad worker, but it's funny that he was here. He was in WWF, and unremarkable as far as his look. It was like literally one of my friends described him as a creative wrestler. Like default creative wrestler, and not wrong. By the way, this is a six-man tag. It took on what was left of Superstar Billy Graham in 1985. What was left of Abdullah the Butcher, as well as Conga the Barbarian. Yes, the same Barbarian that teamed up with the Warlord, and the same Barbarian that teamed up with Ming in the Faces of Fear, and the same Barbarian that I would be terrified of if I ran into him. Especially since I don't think he lives up here, so I don't know how in the world I'd do that. Apparently very nice guy. Sam was the size of a rail here, and had the personality of one, and basically bumped around a whole lot. Abdullah just tried not to fall down. Billy Graham took more bumps here, I think, than he did in his entire title reign in the WWF. Things break down, and the camera's lost with all this action going on, even though there's multiple cameras. But Sam manages to roll up what was left of Billy Graham. 1, 2, 3. Now, Billy Graham was on the sauce again and doing his stuff, but oh boy, Jesus Christ, that was certainly something. They gave Sam Houston a victory. And him and Baby Doll were dating, and apparently were, like, gone from the company by sometime in 86? They were in Mid-South. So now we get to the Boogie Woogie Man, Jimmy Valiant, who by this point had been wrestling for so goddamn long that people that had black and white TVs would have remembered him. People that invented the black and white TVs. People that saw in black and white in the 20s would have remembered Jimmy Valiant. But he had Avalanche Buzz Tyler in his corner against Paul Jones, number one Paul Jones, with Abdullah the Butcher in his corner. It was a dog collar match. This was not nearly as good as Piper and Greg Valentine. You could have tried out Piper now against what's left of Greg Valentine now, and that would have been better than this. I mean, I'm sorry. But Jimmy Valiant and Paul Jones had had this feud going on for about 5 million years at this point. Referee Earl Hebner. And there was lots of feedback on the microphone and everything, and crowd noise and people talking. I don't know if it was a technical crew. You could hear a lot of people, and it sounded like when they were talking, there was maybe a full row of teeth between 5 of them. But Jimmy bled a lot. Paul ended up bleeding at one point, I think Paul, there was a lot of blood on this show. There isn't a lot of action to this, but the crowd was so into everything the Boogie Woogie Man, Jimmy Valiant, did, it didn't matter. So Jones collided with Abdullah, and Jimmy hit an elbow. 1, 2, 3. Then we get a brief skirmish afterwards. This isn't like when Shaska Watley, or Pez Watley, turned on Jimmy and became Shaska Watley, and then the hair versus hair match, and whatever. Speaking of even though it shouldn't have been, this would have been fine if it had been shorter. The Road Warriors, who were still the AWA Tag Team Champions at this point, with Paul Ellering, blonde Paul Ellering, which is weird, against Ivan Koloff and Crusher Khrushchev, who, yes, was Barry Darsow, the future Demolition Smash, the future Repo Man, shrieking Simon Miller noises, and future Hole-in-One Barry Darsow. He was a golfer that was a wrestler. He was also the Blacktop Bully. He was also one of Bill Goldberg's victims. During his streak, that sounded wrong. So, Road Warriors were going to finish up in the AWA at this point. I'm trying to remember who they dropped the tag titles to. It was Jimmy Garvin and somebody? No, Jimmy Garvin. I don't remember. I'm trying to remember who it was. It wasn't the Fabulous Ones. I'm trying to remember who they dropped the tag titles to. So anyway, it was a slugfest. Ivan was still taking bumps. At one point, later in the match, he's up on the goddamn turnbuckle, and they throw him off of there. And Ivan's like, I beat Bruno, and I was a number of years into my career, And that was 14 years ago. What am I doing here? And Ivan still was doing this shit in the early 90s. And was still doing it well. Do not misunderstand me. Ivan Koloff was a big goddamn star. But the thing is, he didn't need a title. And him being a transitional champion made sense. But let's be honest. Was Ivan Koloff a world champion? Was he world champion material? I mean, rest in peace, Ivan Koloff. But no. He didn't need to be, though. Him, Billy Graham, and Ernie Ladd actually were 3 heels in the WWF. They got the same pay. They kind of strong-arm Vince Sr. saying, hey, we're all doing what we're doing wherever we are in the card. This is learned from Cornette's podcast. We want to get the same pay, and they got it. So it was a slugfest, and it broke down later, and then Khrushchev brought a chair. He used it, and then Hawk decided to wail on everybody, I think including 5 people in the front row, which would explain the lost teeth, and not the fact it's the South. And it would lead to a double DQ. So, I mean, that makes sense, because it was, by the way, this is for the NWA tag titles. I forgot to mention that. But the Russians were going to lose to the Rock and Roll Express, who were coming in and would beat them 3 days after this. I think it was the 9th of July. They beat them in a really, really hot building. My God. That was a hot building. Was that the Dorton Arena? No, that wasn't the Dorton Arena. Anyway, so Kamala got a big entrance on a cart. I don't know if Dustin Rhodes was driving a cart this time, because I know he's driving an 86. But anyway, a lot of feedback. The nature music playing over the loudspeaker was funny. Apparently the first ever speaker in existence, and I know it was the 80s. I know the technology was weird. I know it was a stadium. But my God, that speaker literally sounded like it was buried underground. Magnum TA against Kamala for the U.S. title. Could Magnum belly-to-belly him? He did. And I know the idea with the Kamala gimmick was supposed to be that he couldn't wrestle, and that gave him a lot of longevity, and he did well with it. And Kamala was a big draw. He was a big draw in Mid-South. He was a big draw in Memphis for the time he was there. And he was a big draw in World Class. He would go from territory to territory. Vince didn't really know what to necessarily do with him during his couple stints in the WWF. But Kamala, even had a brief run in WCW and then became a truck driver because his body was breaking down. But God, he couldn't wrestle for shit. I mean, my God. I mean, I know he's just supposed to do the chops and just do the stuff and stuff like that, and it worked if you saw it in small doses. But, so basically, Skandar Akbar, mainstay manager of Mid-South and World Class was over there in Kamala's corner. He kept calling him Kimala for some reason. I don't know why. And eventually, we got a DQ because Akbar's just like, fuck it, boom. And Magnum felt like something slammed him, right in the neck and everything. Not unlike about a year plus later. But anyway, a slam and a big belly-to-belly to a pop. That was cool. That was a big goddamn moment because Kamala didn't want to do jobs. So, oh, boy. Ooh. Ooh. God, that crowd got roaring. Nikita and Ivan got a big entrance with the Russian national anthem of some variety playing. And then Flair arrived in Chopper 9 with Harold Johnson. Big old Johnson getting right out of that chopper. He did call the announcer CJ. Or he said, thank you, CJ. So I just like to say, fuck CJ. Fuck his goddamn parents for telling him that he should be doing ring announcing. Tell him to do something else. Parents that are likely dead because the ring announcer is likely dead. I don't know why the news reporter had to rubber chicken people that are in the Charlotte area that are still coherent. Please let me know, because this is 40 fucking years ago. But the chopper thing was a big deal. And people were like, oh, Charlotte recreated. Yeah, here's the difference. Rick actually did good with it. Even as many problems as Rick has. But he hyped up the crowd. Well, I mean, Flair did, but, Mr. Johnson hyped up the crowd, just waving his last name around like crazy. And he introduced Flair, and then we got Ric Flair versus Nikita Koloff for the NWA World title. And, man, let me tell you, for somebody that was fresh out of goddamn wrestling school, Nikita was. Bless Nikita Koloff. He's still alive. He understands the spot he was put in. And really, when you look at it here to when he suffered a broken neck in, I believe it was Halloween Havoc 92, he did not wrestle again. I don't believe he did. I don't think he ever wrestled again. He only had like a 7-8 year career. And he even took a break at one point when his first wife had, was it Parkinson's or something like that? His first wife died, I believe, if I remember right. And he actually took some time off. Which, it's unfortunate. It was because of that. Noble that he did that. It shows the honor that Nikita had. And I know what his real name is, but let me just work with it here because I don't know him personally. But obviously, he was not rushing. He played it well. And him and Hawk were on every goddamn steroid in the world at that point. But Flair and Nikita fresh out of school, wrestling school, and Flair bumped his ass up. Oh, David Crockett was the referee. And the reason is because Nikita and Ivan had attacked him on television, either the show before or in the interim. So, Flair bumped like a madman. David was a terrible referee, just like he was a terrible commentator. He had great enthusiasm, but my God. Lots of bear hugs. This match really did kind of drag, but I mean, again, bless Nikita. He eventually developed to where he did better, but when you are such a rookie, when you're as green as the grass outside, people in the business would say that, by the way. That's what you're going to have to do. A figure four to a major roar. I mean, my God, that was a major roar. And then the stupidest. Ever since people were pointing out, there was a Bret Hart shoot interview about Flair obviously blading during WrestleMania 8, and he talked about his issues with Flair at the time. But ever since that kind of stuff and other things, you can tell when Flair's cutting himself. Not that Hogan's any better. Hogan's not a magician. Moxley just doesn't care. He'll just do it. But Flair hits into the post, rolls, and he's in the grass, and then he goes under the ring, and they have to cut away. Because, Flair, Nature Boy's cutting again, woo! And then he's bleeding, and he kept fighting back, and don't get me wrong, Nikita was there for the spots, but those heavy chops must have hurt. They really must have hurt. Ivan just interferes and attacks David for what he was worth, the sack of shit ref that he was. And then, literally after that, as Ivan and Nikita are getting heat and David's down, there is a fan that rushes the ring, and those Charlotte cops are right on him. It's a guy in yellow. If that was a plant, then a good job there. I don't think it was a plant because they cut the fuck away from that guy. But my God, I salute you, man, that is likely dead at this point. But that was insane. Those cops were right at him. That was some good heat right there. And then we get an outside in where Flair lands on Nikita. 1, 2, 3. Good fast count there, David. Post-match attack. And by the way, Howard Johnson also warned people not to throw anything at the ring. They were already doing that before that match. And fans, just stay away from the ring. Just stay away. Just go. Go onto that side of the stadium. What are you doing? And Sam Houston shows up to help. And it's gone. Sam Houston couldn't do anything right. And then basically, Flair's retained. And now we go to Dusty versus Tully Blanchard for the TV championship with Baby Doll. Baby Doll was referred to as a perfect 10, and the only way I think I can justify that is people did a lot of cocaine in the 80s and their standards were lowered. If that's a perfect 10, my God, we should all remain celibate. So, a steel cage match, TV title, and if Dusty won, then Baby Doll would be his for 30 days. This will also lead to Baby Doll's face turn. So, more like showmanship and everything. But because Dusty, to be perfectly honest, at this point was kind of getting a little long in the tooth. And Tully was a great showman and a great worker, but he picked his spots when he was motivated. Dusty bled early, then Tully bled. Tully at one point, when he was getting like the figure 4 locked on, he's like, shit! I don't know why that made me laugh. And then Dusty basically like wails away, throws him into the cage. He gets beat down also. We get a figure 4. He kind of misses an elbow in an awkward spot. Baby Doll throws something to Tully, or hands something to Tully that he puts in his elbow pad. But then Dusty says, nah, fuck it, we going too long, baby. Hits a pile driver, 1, 2, 3, and then Baby Doll's upset because she's got to be in Dusty's care for 30 days. Let's be perfectly honest. Tully Blanchard would have taken care of Baby Doll. Definitely would have taken better care than one of Tully's, one of Tully's, friends and colleagues, Gino Hernandez, who actually was still alive, shockingly, at this point. But the whole thing is Baby Doll would end up going face because Tully would end up slapping her. I mean, whatever. She had so much goddamn blush and makeup on her goddamn cheeks. How could you fucking tell? So that's the Great American Bash 1985. Certainly a memorable event for some good reasons and some wrong reasons. But what did you guys think? What did I miss? Let me know in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter, Letterboxd, Blue Sky handles in the description. I'm John Renthlan. Until we meet again, happy trails to you.